Hello everybody, Captain Klein here, and we're here for edition number 6 of Q&A with the Captain as we work through our COVID pandemic, and we try to provide you with answers to your questions and information that's helpful to you and your family to support you during this time. This week's topic is going to be hurricane preparedness with a special twist of how do we do that in a COVID-19 environment. So the first thing I'm going to talk about with you is your mask. I know it's uncomfortable, and I know people don't like wearing them. But I just want to remind everybody that while you're on federal property, while you're in our buildings, and when you're coming to work, you have to have that mask with you at all times. And you have to wear it when you can't maintain that physical distancing 6 feet from other people. I was talking to the CEO of the hospital the other day, and anytime they have an in-person meeting, doesn't matter how far away they can maintain their spacing, it doesn't matter how long the meeting is. Anytime they have a meeting between any number of personnel, and they limit their meetings to less than 10 people, everybody wears a mask the entire time. So I want to encourage you all to adopt that posture to protect yourself and to protect those around you as we learn more and more about this disease and how it can be spread. Okay? So let's move into question number 1, and that is, how can I prepare for hurricane season with the COVID-19 pandemic going on right now? Well, that's a great question, because a hurricane is going to come, and we're not going to have a vaccine or widespread immunity or whatever to COVID-19, so some things are going to be different. Now, interestingly, this week was our hurricane exercise. Fleet Forces Command and CNIC put together an annual exercise. It was supposed to happen in March this year, and it was moved because of COVID, but we just finished that up this week. Now, the exercise is really an essential part of us maintaining our preparedness for any kind of disaster or destructive weather that comes our way. And we did have a special emphasis, like I said, on things that changed during COVID-19 this year, and really it made conducting that exercise even more important, so that we could account for the existence of a widespread infectious disease in our planned response. So what I'll tell you is making sure that your family is prepared for hurricane is one of the most important things you can do. Now, I'm assuming that a lot of you are spending a lot more time with your families than maybe you normally do, which makes it a perfect time to talk to them about what your plan is for a hurricane and what potentially your responsibilities are as a service member, because a lot of us are considered essential personnel. And so even if an evacuation order is given or everybody else is sort of hunkering down at home, we have people who are going to have to come to work and have to serve during that hurricane. So you really have to make sure your family is prepared. If they're going to evacuate, they have an evacuation plan. If they're going to be hunkered down at home, as you've gone through how to secure the house and you've got an emergency kit, hurricane kit put together. There is going to be a hurricane that approaches Hampton Roads. Right now is the time to get ready for it. Hurricane season starts on June 1st and goes to November 30th. So we've got plenty of time to prepare. Now, there are some great resources out there. There's a Ready Navy website and the Ready.gov website. They've got tips on preparing your home and family and making a hurricane kit. So I encourage you to go to those websites and look that information up. In addition, you're all familiar with NFAS, the Navy Family Accountability and Assessment System. So that system is used to make sure that we can track personnel where they're at after a hurricane, and then that you can send a signal that you need some help or support after a hurricane. It's called a needs assessment, and those things are done after a hurricane passes through. So everybody should have gone to NFAS in March and updated their information. I encourage you to download the app to your phone to make sure you got your username and password working and you know how to get in to account for yourself and your family and to express any needs that you need in the event of a hurricane. Finally, we have these wide area alert networks. So you're familiar with ad hoc probably. Everybody who works for the Navy should be registered in ad hoc, but I'll tell you, you can register your family as well. And if you have any questions about how to do that, you can get in touch with our Emergency Management Officer, Tim Frazier. His number is 836-5673, or you can look him up on email and get in touch with him. He will walk you through how to register for ad hoc and how to get your family registered. We send out our weather alerts that way, base closures, facility changes, things like that. And the other thing that I found just recently is the Virginia Beach. I live in Virginia Beach, and they have a municipal system that does emergency alerting. And so no matter where you live here in the Hampton Roads area, I think each city has their own alert system. So I encourage you to go to the city website and look up how to register for that, and you'll get those thunderstorm alerts and tornado warnings and things like that directly to your phone. And they'll also use those during a hurricane to let you know what municipal services are, where the evacuation shelters are, and that sort of thing. So right now, there's a lot you can do to start getting ready for hurricane season. I encourage you to take those steps before hurricane season arrives. Question number 2. How will I know the operations of the base if a hurricane were to hit, especially during COVID-19? Well, we use a lot of ways to communicate the status of the base and publicize our base operations. if we get hit by a hurricane or any destructive weather, just like in the wintertime for winter storms. Our public affairs officer is very active on our social media platforms. Emergency management and operations run the ad hoc system to make sure that we're getting the information out as it comes in to let everybody know. Myself, the operations officer, the XO will send all hands emails out to tenants and to the folks that work for the base to let them know what's going on. And then we do use the local public radio stations and news stations, so you can always tune in to Wavy 10 or Channel 13 and look for the status of the base and what's going on there. If you live in Lincoln Military Housing, they have their red flag email system, so everybody should be registered for that, and they'll take our messages and repeat them on red flag and then generate messages of their own to alert you of the status of the local area and the housing and the bases. Additionally, we use electronic marquees and post flyers on Facebook. Like I said, social media is really a key way for us to get our information out there. So if you have any questions, I guess my first answer is go to our social media sites, Facebook and Twitter, and see what's posted there. And then you can always check in with your chain of command. Question number 3. How can I talk to my kids about hurricanes without them being afraid, especially with everything going on with COVID-19 right now? Well, that's a great question, and that's a really hard one to answer. Got to be honest with you. I'm no expert on this, but when it comes to talking to kids, the important thing is really to be truthful with them, and to tell them that sometimes there are things you don't know, but really you have to explain it to them on their level. Keep it simple. Keep your explanations and conversations short, especially with younger kids. And then the other thing is to make it interesting for them and help them understand that while you don't control the hurricane, you certainly can control your preparations for it. So have them participate in making the hurricane kit. Make sure they understand what's going to happen if there's a storm coming and why you're pulling all the furniture in and the bottled water and the canned goods and how you're going to manage if a hurricane comes and what will you do afterwards. The more they know about it and how to prepare and keep themselves safe, I think the more confident they'll feel if and when a hurricane comes. The other thing I'll tell you is on Monday we'll be posting another video from Fleet and Family, Sharice Josie, and she's going to be talking not specifically about this, but part of what she talks about, it covers how to talk to your kids in times of crisis and over these really difficult subjects. So please, I encourage you to watch that video. And then if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Fleet and Family, and they have some great tips and some great folks that can help you work through having these very difficult conversations with your kids. Question number 4. What is the base doing to prepare for a hurricane? Well, so question 1, we talked about the HUREX that we just went through, and I covered a little bit of it there, but for some more in-depth, we have a very comprehensive emergency action plan for a hurricane in any destructive weather, and like I said, we practiced it over the last week. That did focus a lot on how we communicate with the region, with our tenants, with our families, our sailors internally, and a lot of the processes we'd follow to do our reporting. And in addition, all of our departments reviewed the steps that they're going to take to protect their facilities and equipment, how they're going to recall personnel, or not really recall them, but track them. But more importantly, we reviewed the timelines and the decisions that we're going to make to make sure that in addition to preparing the installation, we give our personnel the opportunity to prepare themselves and their families. So as a reference to one of the other questions, a lot of our personnel are essential personnel, and they will be required to work in some form or other during a storm or after a storm. So what we did is we reviewed how we're going to do that, and follow that process to make sure everybody has the time to prepare and that the base is prepared as well. Even though we generally have advance warning of a destructive weather like this, particularly hurricanes, everyone should have a personal emergency kit at home, and you should have a plan that you've practiced with your family, with your kids, so they know and they're familiar with their actions. But you also need to have that plan in your work center. So, anybody who's heard me talk before, we have over 100 different buildings and facilities that we work out of on any day during the week here at NSA Hampton Roads, and so each building and facility is going to be a little bit different, from sandbagging to computer equipment to things that need to be done. This exercise is part of getting ready for that, and if you're not familiar with those steps that you have to take, there's still time. Each facility has their own emergency action plan that you can review to make sure you understand what steps will be required. So I feel like we're very well prepared for a hurricane here, knowing that we don't control the wind, we don't control the rain, we don't control the storm surge. There will be things that are unavoidable, damage that's unavoidable. But our process, I think, is fairly robust, and I think our personnel are well educated and well practiced to respond to any damage or incidents from a hurricane. Question number 5. What are the evacuation zones, and how do I know what zone I am in? That's a great question, and that's something everybody needs to do before the hurricane comes. They need to go to the Know Your Zone website, and they need to look up where their address is. And almost as important, they need to see what's around them. So, for instance, I live in a Zone Charlie, but I'm surrounded by a Zone Alpha. So while my house, in theory, doesn't get flooded by storm surge or whatever, I'm cut off when I'm at my house. My family is cut off when we're at our house until those flood waters would recede. So it's really important to understand that. And the Know Your Zone system is designed to let you know what the flooding risk is. And so when you evacuate Zone Alpha, it's due to the flooding risk from storm surge or from the projected rainfall. It doesn't address the damage from winds and down trees and things like that. So while Know Your Zone is really important, and when the governor orders an evacuation of Zone Alpha or Bravo or Charlie, you have to know what zone you're in because that's a legally binding order. Just knowing your zone doesn't eliminate the risk. So when everybody checks into NSA Hampton Roads, we have them go to the website, put in their address, and record on our recall roster what zone they live in, so we know the personnel that will be affected by an evacuation. But that doesn't mean your preparation ends there. So Know Your Zone serves about 1.25 million residents in coastal Virginia, and it's the region of the state that's most vulnerable to hurricanes, obviously. Approximately 23 independent localities participate in the system. And like I said, you go to the Know Your Zone website, which, by the way, during Hurricane Florence, when it was first rolled out, the system crashed, and so everybody was trying to look up where they lived, and nobody could get online to figure it out. That's why it's so important to know that ahead of time. It's a pretty simple process. You just you click on the Find Your Zone button, enter your address, and the zone results are displayed for you. So, like I said, it's important to do that ahead of time. It's also important to know what's around you. And then the final thing is, if you're directed to evacuate because you're in Zone Alpha, and it would be a really bad storm if we got to Zone Bravo, but I guess it's possible. The evacuation means you're supposed to go to another zone that isn't being evacuated. And those zones exist throughout coastal Virginia. So, for instance, Town Center is either Zone Charlie or Zone Delta. So if you live in the Virginia Beach area and you have to evacuate from your home, you don't necessarily have to go to Kentucky or Indiana or something like that into the heartland to escape the path of the storm. You can just go to a local hotel and stay there. I'll mention that because in a COVID environment, that becomes even more important. Right now we have those travel restrictions in place that limit us to 75 miles from NSA Hampton Roads. That goes through at least the end of June. We've not gotten any indication of whether or not it's going to be extended further. But as COVID continues to be a reality for us and an environment for us, where you go outside of this local area will also impact what happens when you return. And you certainly don't want to have a plan to go somewhere that has a higher incidence of community transmission or a higher risk to you or your family, especially if you're in one of those high-risk categories. So as another step to prepare, I encourage everybody to look around at where the hotels are at and what zone they're in, and have a plan if you have to evacuate because you're Zone Alpha of what hotel you might go to or what friend you might be able to stay with that's not in Zone Alpha, just to limit the amount of travel we have to do because of the uncertainties of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I know that was a longer video than maybe some people were expecting, but hurricane season's coming. We get hit by hurricanes pretty regularly here in the Hampton Roads area, so it's worth talking about and it's worth being prepared. So thank you for your attention today. That's all we have for this week. Until next week, be healthy, stay safe, wash your hands, and wear your mask. That's all. Captain out.